for a conversation around how to maintain our creativity when faced with adversity. I do want to let everyone know that one of our panelists, Jonathan, is currently tending to some unforeseen priorities, but he hopes to join us very shortly. And in the meanwhile, Stephanie, I'll pass it off to you.
Great, thanks so much. Sorry, all. Just so letting folks in from the waiting room. So hi, everyone. We are so excited to have you here. Alana and I work in the Office of Alumni Relations, and we are so excited to be able to bring events and programs like this to alumni across the country and across the world. So thank you again for joining us. Just a few housekeeping items. First of all, this event is being recorded, and we will be sending out a recording of the event in the next couple days. Also, I encourage you to select the speaker view in your Zoom settings. So once I stop the screen share, you'll be able to then focus on whoever is speaking in that given moment. We also recommend that you stay muted throughout the duration of the event just to ensure that we have a nice sound quality throughout. And then lastly, we will be monitoring the chat box throughout the event. So if you have any questions during the event, please feel free to put them in there. And then at the end, when we're ready for Q&A, I will be reading out all questions from there. So please feel free again to populate that as you're inspired to, or wait till the end when we're ready if inspiration strikes you later on as well. So now I'd like to introduce our panelists and our moderator. Firstly, we have Hannah Larson, who graduated from Northeastern in 2017. She majored in theater and minored in international affairs and women's, gender, and sexuality studies. Hannah is a director, a dancer, an actor, and a yoga teacher. She tells stories and helps others to tell their own stories. And as Alana said, we're waiting on Jonathan, and hopefully he'll be able to join us. Jonathan is a double Husky. He graduated from Northeastern with his undergraduate degree in communication studies in 2004 and his master's degree in digital media in 2012. Jonathan is an internationally recognized session drummer and percussionist who lives in Boston. He has been recording and touring with artists around the world for more than 20 years. And then we are so lucky today to have our moderator with us, Terrence Johnson, who is a multimedia journalist originally from Mississippi. Terrence graduated from Northeastern with his master's degree in media advocacy in 2020. So just very recently, a recent grad. Currently, Terrence works as the associate digital producer and co-host of Keep It Social from WGBH, which is a digital series produced for and by Gen Zs and millennials on topical social and digital media issues and trends. So let me stop my screen share and I will hand it over to Terrence.
Hi, everyone. Again, my name is Terrence Johnson. I, like Stephanie said, work here in Boston at WGBH. I graduated from Northeastern not too long ago. So yeah, when I moved to Boston, it was very different from Mississippi, but definitely appreciative of the experiences I have so far. So thank you, Stephanie. Thank you, Alana. Thank you, Northeastern, for providing this space for us. And, giving us the opportunity to talk about this in this moment, right? When so many different conversations seem to all be happening at once. It's great that we can kind of have our little piece of the pie as well. So of course, Jonathan isn't here right now, but again, hopefully he joins us soon. So my friend Hannah and I are going to lead the conversation until he's able to join us. So Hannah, creatives seem to find a way to, bring out their best work sometimes when They're in moments of devastation, of loss, or, just confusion. Sometimes being in those relatively gray or dark areas in life can sometimes sprout some of our best work. So for you yourself, Hannah, how have you continued to work and motivate yourself, especially in this moment? And what has that looked like, not only for you, but like those around you and in your community?
Yeah, that's a great question. There definitely have been times in my life where I've gone through something that has deeply changed me and has caused me to grow or shift in different ways. And that's kind of created an outpouring of some kind of creative work.
Yeah.
That, at least to me, was very meaningful. And in this particular moment with the pandemic that came up a few months ago, and then, with the huge, social change and crises that were kind of shifting and evolving afterwards, I actually found myself taking a really big step back. And I actually thought to myself, okay, I'm not going to try and create something. I'm not going to try and find a job right away. I had been furloughed from my babysitting work. So much kind of felt like so much of the ground beneath me was shifting. So I had a knee-jerk reaction of like, oh, I should be productive and do X, Y, Z. But then I realized there was this like voice in the back of my head that was like, you can't do any of that until you do some deeper foundational work. And for quite a while, I had been wondering, well, what's my purpose? What's my purpose? Now there's all these things that have changed, and I was looking for that answer outside of myself. And then I finally realized that answer that was not going to come from anyone. I had to take that time for myself. And so I really worked on letting go of what I thought I was going to do with my life and listen to perhaps a new path or a new purpose that might come from that. And there's this really amazing Buddhist monk, Pema Chodron, who talks about how when we're in the unknown, the possibilities are limitless. So I tried to remember that and keep reminding myself of that. And I really took an intentional step back from trying to be involved creatively. So, I was thinking I had just finished this dance certification, and I thought, okay, you know what, I'm intentionally choosing not to take classes right now online, because of course, everything moved online. There was this huge proliferation of all these offerings. And I had happened to listen to this podcast called Dance Union. And one of the hosts had talked about how, if you're taking classes, great. If you're not, great. But you know what? You're alive right now. You're here. You're making it in this pandemic and these times of crises. And all of that really helped me. It helped me think about and focus more on being instead of doing, which is so hard. We get so much messaging and expectations around being productive, but I also really didn't want to risk burning out, because that happened last summer. And I actually created a whole dance theater piece last summer about millennials seeking purpose in a capitalist society. So as you can see, I've been kind of dealing with this question for a while. And
Since, the piece that really stood out was when you said we aren't.
Oh, could you, you're breaking up a little bit.
Apologies. Can you hear me now?
It's still a little croaky.
Oh. How about now?
Good.
Great. Okay.
Yeah.
Loudly. But yeah, you brought up a piece that I think is really important. This idea of not being productive and still seeing value in that moment, right? I think I'm also one of those people, especially when the pandemic hit. I was like, what am I going to do? How am I going to be of service, right? How am I going to be of value in this moment? And I agree. It is the messaging. It is the very ethos of, you know, who we are to kind of assume that everything that we do, or most of what we do, is based solely on our work, and that work is sometimes the only value that there is. I do want to pause and say welcome to Jonathan, who is here right now. He's joining us. Hi, Jonathan. Where are you?
How are you?
I'm great. Your audio is a little staticky, my friend. We can't really hear you that well. I'm sorry. Okay.
Give me one.
Great. Okay, we'll wait for Jonathan. But until then, you know, again, back to the earlier question about how do you motivate yourself and those around you, right? One of the things that I notice in moments where I'm down or I'm sad or I'm really struggling with my creative spirit, my creative flow, sometimes what's best for me is just to go and talk to friends, talk to family, like go and have some good Southern food because I'm from the South and there's nothing like Southern food. You know, those things that just put me at peace. You know, I think peace is really important for, or at least for my creative process. So Hannah, Jonathan, how do you draw strength from your community? Or where do you find your peace when it comes to, you know, really staying creative and, you know, like you said, Hannah, not really burning out?
Yeah, that's a great question. I feel like for me, my relationship with community has shifted, and I'm sure with everyone else it's very similar. You know, we've all moved more in towards our homes and connected online in a lot of ways. And one of the first things that really helped kind of ground me and give me something kind of meaningful to do was when I had just finished my dance program, which was end of February, and then we went right into the pandemic. Mm-hmm. One of my dance classmates and really good friend had this idea of making a video of our classmates dancing together but alone. So, you know, one person would film themselves like moving into a sequence and then they would like end at some point. And then another person would pick up at the end and then go into something else. And then that person would take the end and then go into another end thing. So, and then my friend basically tied these clips together. And so we were all dancing together. And I ended up meeting up with a friend outside and we filmed each other doing our little sequences. And I think that was a really different way of engaging. And I mean, other ways have been, you know, since then I've come down to Tallahassee from New York to stay with my mom, which has been great. And I also really wanted to reconnect with some part of my roots. I grew up in Turkey, so I started to take a Turkish class, which I had been meaning to do for like 2 years, but I couldn't because I had a dance program. So that community has been really wonderful to connect with, and as well as I also started to take a Chinese medicine course. And that was really wonderful. My acupuncturist in New York was offering it, and I had come down here and I was like feeling directionless and like just like I don't know what to do with my life. I don't feel aligned with myself. And I spoke with my teacher and she had just said, okay, well, we'll make sure to cover that kind of work. So that having that cohort of students who were coming to the class for lots of different reasons, and us like working together in this very deep, meaningful way, and kind of reframing how we look at life, especially from this Eastern perspective, was really, really refreshing.
Yeah, that's really powerful. You know, especially, you know, like you said, drawing from those experiences, drawing from, you know, even just things as simple as just going back home and being with your mom, right? You know, those things are really important. So for Jonathan, I want to know how you also draw strength from your community, right? Like, how have you relied on your community during this time? What exactly does that look like for you? And really, how has it sustained you since we've been in quarantine since, forever?
Well, first of all, I just want to double check. Can you hear me a little bit better?
Yes, you're much clearer this time, my friend.
Okay, so I'm so sorry about that. We've been having internet problems where I am, so I just wanted to. I'm going to hold off on the video just so I can at least get the audio going for now.
Okay.
But I guess for me, the community. I play, hip hop music, and hip hop music is very rooted in a community. A lot of the messaging comes from the RMC in particular comes from, a time where a lot of his messaging is based on experiences that he's gone through in the community, and what he's had to deal with. So being a part of this group with him is for us, because a lot of times you can't necessarily relate from a personal experience, but you can empathize with what he is going through with his message. So we as a group have come together to be very supportive of the community that he is speaking on behalf of. And so it's given me a chance to recognize what goes on, in neighboring towns in Boston, in which, I may not have had any sort of correlation or experience growing up with. So it's given me an opportunity to witness firsthand, understand, take a step back and learn, and just be a listener, and then do what I can on my end to relay the message through music, and be a part of what the message that he's trying to say. So community, especially within the hip hop genre, is very important. It's because everybody sort of is there to help each other out and be sort of a messenger for each of us. And I think it's important, especially now when community has come together in divisive times. It's been really important for our message to be positive while still speaking on, the truth of what's actually going on out there.
Right. And, you're really speaking to this, idea of a collected shared experience, which is, so important and near and dear to me, especially just because I grew up understanding what a collective shared experience is. And I also, too, love hip hop, love rap. So it's definitely something that I'm, very, very familiar with. But, since you brought that up, the resurgence of the Black Lives Matter movement over the last month has really opened a lot of people's eyes to racial inequalities in our society, right? It's sad that so many things had to happen for, people to kind of almost wake up or like widen their lids a little bit to see what was really happening. However, I, for one, am glad that it is happening. So how have you found ways to learn more about these issues and, use your platform to promote these causes? It sounds like you, from your direct relationship with your bandmate, that has been a real source for you. So what are some other ways that you have been able to, connect and use your platform again to promote those things that are close to you?
Well, I think first and foremost, one of the big things, I can hear my echo, but one of the big things for me is, obviously you can't see me right now, but I'm a white man who grew up in a fairly middle-class situation. So when the Black Lives Movement happened, it was really important for me to take a step back and be a listener, because my experiences were not one that I could sympathize with, but I could definitely empathize with. And so I took a minute to step back and just be a listener and say, how can I do my part to help spread the message, and be a somewhat of a support system for others. Mm-hmm. Because a lot of the words that I may say may not hold a lot of weight because I didn't go through the same experiences. And so this band is made up of multicultural people who come from all different backgrounds, in
And
which
for those
case
who don't know,
we
what's
can.
the name of your band, Jonathan?
Oh, I'm sorry. So the band is called Still Gold. It's STLGLD. It's sort of a reference to The Outsiders. Is when one of the characters said, stay gold, pony boy. And so we sort of adapted that as still gold. We're still gold here. But it has been an opportunity for us to, we've been speaking about a lot of this stuff for many years. I mean, we had a song called I Can't Breathe 2 years ago, and it was relatable now when we're dealing with the same situations of violence on young Black men and women. And it was time for this message to be heard around the world. And I mean, we're just a part of the conversation, but we use our platform to speak the truth of what is actually happening. And it feels really good on my end to be able to use music as a means of being a support system, because on my own, I may not be able to speak and have people relate to what I'm saying. So what I can do is say, hey, I'm here with people who are going through this day in and day out, and I'm here, I support them, I'm behind them, and I'm going to be a listener, and I'm also going to use this platform to speak a message of what is going on and how we can make a change together in a unified sort of collaborative effort.
Right. I've actually, when we first started talking about this panel, and you said that you were in this band and you had these tracks that, you all did years ago, I went and listened to some of them, and I agree, it's sad that although those tracks were created a couple years ago, that we're still having to have these same conversations and still seeing these same experiences. On the other hand, Hannah, I'm extremely interested in your perspective, because from my understanding, you being from Turkey, or your family being from Turkey, has really colored your experience. So can you speak to that a little more, just so I myself and everyone on the call can understand what that transition was like for you, since yours was very different from Jonathan's and myself's?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, I was born in New York, but I grew up my whole childhood, like teenage years, in Turkey, and it was really different. I had no awareness basically about how racism was well and alive in the US and also in lots of other parts of the world. And I mean, in Turkey, there are race issues, ethnic issues, nationalist issues, but they just show up a little bit differently. But it's there, it's everywhere. And I think what was also, which also threw a little bit of a color into my experience, was I went to a Protestant high school. And that was a whole trip in and of itself. I basically got a US history education there. And I was taught, just like many, many people in the US, that racism was quote unquote over. Yeah. And so when I came to the US and I started studying at Northeastern, first of all, I had a bit of a culture shock just with the culture of the US and that being different from Turkey. But also I felt this underlying tension around race, and I just didn't understand it. And it wasn't until I had a minor in women's gender and sexuality studies that I really learned about how racism is really here and it's really not gone away in any kind of way. So yeah, when this June came around and the resurgence of Black Lives Matter happened and the protests and the uprisings really took over and became the forefront of so many people's minds, I really realized it's just so not enough to know about it. And I really took that time to continue educating myself in a deeper way, and to also share that information on my social media platforms. And I came across this really wonderful workshop called Mapping Our Roles for Social Change in Times of Crisis. It's by Deepa Iyer. And it really helped me identify my roles, like what my roles could be, and so I could take better action as a healer, a nurturer, a storyteller, a builder, a disruptor, and to kind of think, okay, now within this, now that I've clarified like where I know I naturally have gifts or privileges that I could share, I was able to think, okay, well, I want to volunteer and teach yoga and to do it, you know, and to make sure it can, you know, go towards protesters or go towards underrepresented communities. And I felt like I could also support my friends in my own community in a more effective way. So that those have all been really just, you know, deep changes, and ones that I'm so grateful for. Because Terrence, you'd said, you know, it's hard, but it's necessary. And I'm glad in a lot of ways that more and more people are becoming aware of this. And I was also really lucky that in my yoga community where I trained, they were offering workshops online. And there was one workshop about racism and appropriation. And I really was able to delve deeper and really see how the Western yoga industry, it doesn't include Southeast Asian voices. And it does by no means make BIPOC folks feel welcome, because classes are expensive, gear is expensive, retreats or trainings or, you know, clothing, whatever, it's just inaccessible. And community classes, they're at noon when so many people of color are working, and they're even not really that accessible price-wise. So just that awareness, and then being able to go even a little bit deeper and to shift how I teach, and to take the, like, that commodification of yoga, of it being just good vibes or a really good workout, and to say, well, I think when we look at it in that way, it allows for spiritual bypassing. And basically that just means it's whitewashing. It's allowing for people to, like, not feel so deeply or to slow down. And I've been able to shift how I teach. And yeah, I think I'm really grateful for this time, because it's made me a better person, a better teacher, a better ancestor. And it's not like it's gonna end now, like just doing this work now. So yeah.
You know, I think that's really important from both, like, even when Jonathan and you both described your experiences of, you know, listening to people, pushing narratives forward, changing the way you teach, doing a deeper dive into your own conscience, into your own experience. A lot of people characterize those kinds of things as allyship. And I think for me, when it goes to, you know, doing that work, changing the way, or working to change systems for people who have traditionally been excluded, I go a little bit further and say that those people are our accomplices, right? Like, you're there in a different way, pushing an experience forward, right? Working to change a system that has hindered so many. And so, as someone who has maintained their creative energy, and pivoted during these so many unforeseen hurdles, Jonathan, what is some advice that you can offer others hoping to do the same? You know, wondering just not only how do I get to the next day, but the next week, but just once I get there, how do I maintain that energy? How do I keep the train going? So what advice do you have?
So that's a great question, because I feel like everybody kind of went through the same situation where it was this fear of what was going to happen. We didn't really have any idea of what was going on. And then eventually it was kind of like this, all right, we're going to be in this for a while, and I don't want to be stuck being, you know, in a situation where I'm not doing anything or using this time wisely. And I think that's a big part of it, is we never have time. I mean, time is such a valuable resource, And now we have an abundance of it. You know, we have so much time. We don't even know what to do with our time. I feel like that was the big thing. It's like whenever we use it ineffectively or inefficiently, we're always just like, well, I didn't have time to do that. Well, I kind of got to the point where I was like, well, now I have all the time, so I have no excuse not to use it to my advantage. And so for me, the biggest part and the biggest problem was, you know, I play music, so I need other people to, you know, be a part of it with me. So I spent most of my time being sort of a cheerleader or a motivator to be like, hey, listen, when this pandemic comes to an end, if we haven't done anything for the 3, 4, 5 months, it's going to be really hard for us to transition into normal, you know, normal structure again. So we might as well do something that can kind of lead us in and make the transition a lot easier. So what I did was I still recorded under the radar. You know, I did a lot of like sort of guerrilla recording in which we didn't tell anybody that we were recording, and we did it safely.
Did you social distance while you were in the studio?
We definitely did social distancing while we were in the studio. I mean, to be honest with you, I'm a drummer, so I'm usually locked in a room that nobody can get into anyway. So it does work. It was really the big thing was to motivate the people that I needed to work with to want to stay busy. It's like, for instance, yes, we can't play live shows, but all those records that you've been meaning to record at this point, now's the time to do them because we have the time to do them. It was getting people to get on board with wanting to stay busy during a time in which we had all the restrictions, you know, against us. And I feel like I'm someone who, you know, I went through the motions of saying, oh, what's the point? Is music even going to come back at this point? Is it even worth for me? Should I go try and use, you know, I was a photography major at Northeastern. So it was like, I guess I'll just go back to doing photography, you know? I mean, but part of me was like, nah, I'm not giving up on this. Like, I'm not giving up on the fact that they say music can't be played live, but it can still be made, and it can still be, we can still be creative with it. So I would get up every day and I would say, all right, I have to do this record, and I'm going to call the producer that wants to do this record and say, listen, we're going to do this over the internet, or I'm going to stand outside your studio and we can text each other, but we're going to keep this going so that when people say, okay, it's safe to go back and a vaccine is, you know, established, or we've figured out a cure of some sort, that we're already ready to go. And we have all this music that we've just made over the last 8 months that we're ready to put out there. So that was the first 2 months. And then once people were on board with it, it was like, all right, what are we doing today? We have nothing to do other than make art, make music, stay creative. We have the time to do it. My job does not require me to come in at this point. So I have all the freedom to, you know, work. I mean, I remember like wishing that I had a job in which I could be remote, and now I'm remote. So I'm taking advantage of having that remote time, being able to do the work stuff wherever I am and stay creative during this time in which people are saying, we're not sure when something is coming back. I think it will eventually come back, but we just, in the meantime, it's important to stay motivated, because making that transition to back to normal life when you've done nothing for 8 months versus when you've done something for 8 months.
Right. So Hannah, let's jump right over to you. While you have not been using this time in active creation like Jonathan has, how have you found yourself in a more introspective space, right? How have you been resetting in this unique moment? I've tried to figure out myself ways to reset. So hopefully I learned something for you. So what's that process been like?
Yeah, it's been hard. It's been hard to take that step back and not like follow through with my impulse to like somehow, maybe, at least for me, because it wouldn't come from an authentic place or a place of like full capacity. I felt like I would just be like somehow just doing something performatively, or just trying to just make something when there wasn't the energy behind it. So a lot of this time I really thought about it as a time of healing. And really taking a step back, and the Chinese medicine course really helped also reframe my exploration around purpose. My teacher talked about how, you know, we chose to come into this life, and our soul, if you believe in that, made a contract for our destiny, which is called Ming. And it's not so much a fate thing, but it's more about this contract in which our purpose is set in motion. And we just keep committing and recommitting to this over the course of our lives. And I just think that that really helped me. That helped me like shift a little bit and put a little bit less pressure on the purpose aspect, and to allow myself room on, well, I could zoom out on these roles that I had of thinking, oh, I'm a dancer or I'm a director, and saying, well, okay, I'm someone who creatively expresses themselves. And that allowed me some like wiggle room to kind of like find a different way to express. Right. And one of those things is just, I wrote an article about practices that help align ourselves with our purpose. And I did that through this career coaching program that I'm really lucky to be doing online. And that was something unexpected. And I didn't really think that I was gonna come out that way in any kind of way. I don't usually feel comfortable writing. I like to like perform and then walk away, and then it's, you know, it's done, and then it's just in someone's memory, but maybe they won't even remember the whole thing, you know? So, but you know, it's still evolving for me. And I mean, I'm not freaking out as much about like not having the life that I used to have, or the life that I thought I would have. And I'm just continuing to just keep trying to do the being instead of doing. You know, we're human beings, we're not human doings. And it's kind of like just re-reminding. So I think as I do more like impulse, like when I have more of an impulse to take action now, I try to do it from that authentic place where I've done all this work. And so if I see this job online where I'm like, oh, okay, that's cool. Or I have like an idea for a creative thing that I might want to do, or to suddenly have like a solo dance party in my living room, and to just, you know, like, you know, it's just, I think it's, I feel like I'm kind of I feel like the best way to describe it is kind of like, you know, a tree has dead leaves, you know, and you have to kind of like let go of the dead stuff to allow for the new things to come through. So like, that's kind of how this has been feeling. And yeah, I think it's also just, you know, even when I do yoga, to try and do it in a place where I'm like, how can I do it in a more restorative way and not like push myself if I don't feel like my body is like in a place to do that right now. So those are just some things that I feel like I've been able to do.
I really resonated with what you said about the trees and the leaves shedding, because I feel like throughout this process for me, I've shed so many layers and also added so many at the same time, just because it's been a roller coaster of emotions and, you know, processing this new life, this new experience, and all of these things that seem to just all want to happen at the same time. So yeah, I appreciate you, Hannah. I appreciate you, Jonathan, for joining me in this conversation. That concludes all of the questions that I have for the both of you. Again, Alana and Stephanie, thank you so much for allowing me to moderate. And I'm going to pass it over to Alana. Thank you.
Thank you, Terrence. Wonderful job. I'm loving that tree analogy. I need to write that down. But at this point, pardon, sorry, Jonathan, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, you said two things at the end, and I was like, I'm going to steal both of those things.
But at this point, Stephanie will be selecting some questions from the chat box. So if you have any thoughts that you'd like to share, please type those in, and she will be calling them out to our panelists.
Great. So we have a few questions already from the course of the conversation, but as folks get settled in, please feel free to populate any more questions you may have in the chat box. So firstly, from Chris, is there any advice on how to break through a rut or how to get uncomfortable when it's hard to have new experiences that are challenging. I'm going to also take a little liberty with the question and add on, like, especially in this time when so much is so uncomfortable and so much is so challenging, how do we still push ourselves to make ourselves uncomfortable and get there? Why doesn't Jonathan start?
So that's a great question. I feel like feel like I've learned to be more vulnerable, and especially now in this time period where it's hard. You know, I feel like I learned a lot about myself during this pandemic. I feel like I was so busy and I distracted myself every day from actually dealing with the things that internally that I probably should have been dealing with. And it turns out that I needed to just spend some time with myself and kind of be terrified about what my brain was actually thinking or what internally I was thinking. And so this pandemic was really helpful for that, because it made me feel like there were a lot of aspects of my life that I was distracting myself from by playing music every single day or being in the studio or going out after work and all that stuff. So after I spent a lot of that time sort of reevaluating and, just like Terrence said, sort of repivoting, reestablishing, regrounding myself, it was a whole lot of trial and error for me to try different things as an artist, you know, try different like social media campaigns or try different challenges, because I didn't have the normal resources that I have. Whenever I was making music, it was, I go to this world-renowned studio in Cambridge and I make music, and there's people that would make my drums sound great. And there were people that would just tell me what I needed to play, and we play and make records. Well, I didn't have that anymore. So I would have to go, there was a couple times where I went to a neighbor's house and we had to put together like a studio situation in order for me to keep working. And it was terrifying because it didn't sound anything like what I was used to doing when I was going to this studio. But that's what I needed to do in order to, for one, realize that I was taking for granted these resources that I had. And now I was in this position where I had to make do with what was around me and what surroundings I had. So I recorded like 3 or 4 albums in an environment that I was not used to. And it was scary at first. And then I found out towards the end of it, it was like, actually, I can make this work. There are other opportunities for me to continue to make music, even when all of my avenues that I've used before weren't available anymore. And that gave me the confidence to be able to walk into other studios and still be proficient in my art and still have success. And I can actually move forward saying, hey, you know what? I have all of these other opportunities. And even when the world is shut down, I can still work through the process of staying creative and make music.
Great. And Jonathan, just while I have you here, and then I'll toss it to Hannah, I think we have a quick question, and I'm not even going to paraphrase. I'm going to read it verbatim because it's so good. This is from Sean. I'm also in the music biz. What's your best guess on when we'll ever see live music in packed, sweaty clubs again?
It's a good question. I think it's going to change a lot. But I do feel like mid 2021 is when tours are going to be safely able to happen again. And it's not going to come back the way that we thought that it was going to happen. But I don't think there'll be packed, sweaty clubs anymore. I think for at least 2021, we're going to be running at like 30% capacity. So you can have all the room around you. It's like I went to the beach the other day and people are drawing 12-foot squares around their beach chairs. So I feel like we're in this for a while. Luckily, I'm a studio musician, so I'm okay like hiding myself in a studio and never seeing the outside world again.
Yeah. And so, Hannah, for you, any thoughts on how to get uncomfortable and break through?
Yeah, I think that's such a great question. And there were so many things that Jonathan had said that like I really related to, about just trying to distract myself and not really be with what was there. I did that for like a couple of months and I was like, can't run away from this anymore. But as opposed, I think coming out of a rut, I mean, I was really in one too. Like it was really tough. Like it was really emotionally difficult. But I think I also noticed that I had like resistance. Like I just also didn't really want to come out of it. Like I would go in and out of periods, but I think more recently I noticed that there was like resistance to certain things. Like I would think like, well, I need to like come out of this rut because I need to do X, Y, Z, or I would like set up myself like for a huge to-do list of things I wanted to like accomplish. And I kind of, I talked to my therapist at some point about it, and she was like, what if you just say you're going to do like one of those things over the next few weeks? That like relieves like all this pressure from from like accomplishing that one thing. And so yeah, I mean, it's hard because I feel like we're all being called to like face ourselves in different ways and to maybe face and we're just stuck with ourselves, it's like I can't like go to as many places as I used to. So I have to, I'm really like engaging with things that were in the back of my mind. So I think it's also recognizing that resistance in the first place is a huge realization in and of itself. And I had heard this like great advice about that at some point where, you don't have to drive the car from that place of resistance. Like you don't have to like accomplish everything from that place where maybe you're just like not ready for it. And I think I'm all for the vulnerability and pushing ourselves out of our comfort zones. But I feel like sometimes they're just kind of like these ebbs and flows. And I feel like I've really had to take a softer understanding of myself when I go through those places where I'm like really in a rut and I'm like, okay, here I am. Let me just try and be with it because I don't like to feel my feelings often. I'm like trying to learn how to do that. So I don't know. I hope that's useful. But that's definitely what's come up for me.
And how about you, Terrence? Does this resonate with you?
100%. I think when it comes to, because your first question is how do you pull out or gain something, push yourself to be uncomfortable, right? What I have found with myself personally is that those uncomfortable areas, those uncomfortable moments end up being the best moments for me personally. Like I always tell like my friends, I'm like, if you're comfortable, that means you aren't growing, right? Like comfort means you're resting, you're content. There's no really projection forward. You just are where you are. And for a lot of people, comfortable is a good thing, right? And for me, I have tried to really focus on how to kind of in a lot of ways that Hannah and Jonathan have already pointed out, really remain centered in who I am, and still find small ways to give it a little bit of edge, right? So when it comes to my work in particular, I stay consistent with my everyday job just because I need to provide for myself, of course. And then once I put in the ways that I can rest and reset, I then go back and say, how can I utilize and emphasize and push myself just a little bit so that, I'm continuing to add to my experience. And I think it's also important just to recognize that we go through these ebbs and flows of where we are in moments of comfortableness and we are in moments where, we are content, and that's okay as well. I think being able to differentiate when I've been working and I've been doing all of this and now it's time for me to enjoy that work is important just as much as, I'm in a space where things are okay, but it's important for me to keep moving. It's both of those things are important. And just, being aware of your own self-balance and figuring out what works best for me has really been helpful.
Yeah, that's very insightful. So we're gonna end on what hopefully is helpful. I think this question seems to be tailor-made for Hannah, so I'm gonna have her start. It's from Seth, who works with gun safety groups, and there's a lot of emotional intensity right now. What are some tips or recommendations for self-care in these really intense times? And if there are creative outlets, that's great, but really focusing on how do we take care of ourselves?
Yeah, that's a great question. There definitely were moments, you know, especially at the very like onset of the Black Lives Matter movement having this resurgence and the protests just like, you know, taking flame across the country. And I felt like I was feeling it so deeply. And I was in the news all the time or trying to share information. And there were definitely moments of kind of like emotional burnout or like just kind of like feeling moments where I was like, I feel really not okay. Like this is like hitting really hard. And I think in those moments, I think it's really restorative to take a step back from the news or to take a step back from technology to, if you can, and as, you know, obviously in a safe way to be outside and maybe have some kind of contact with nature, to just like take a walk can be really, really helpful, to talk with somebody that you trust. I mean, I found that really useful. And I think it's, you know, there are lots of different things that you can do. You can find, you know, on YouTube, like yoga or meditation. You know, I really highly recommend Yoga Nidra, which is kind of like the yoga of rest. It's like a meditative, restorative thing that you can find lots of different topics that you can focus on. It is definitely a trial and error. And I've heard like a really good piece of advice somewhere where it said, like, I think it's good to make a list of your like tools that you have in your toolbox of like how to take care of yourself. And you can like pull one out and be like, okay, I have this, let's try this. And then see what comes from that. And if that didn't work, okay, like how about that meditation thing? Okay, let's like see what's in there and like what, and go from there. So yeah, I think it's really tough and things are changing all the time. And I think finding some solace in that one constant, in the fact that everything is always changing. I know it's kind of like intense, but at the same time, it's also helpful to be like, well, it's not going to be like this forever. Like, I'm not going to feel like this forever. It's going to pass. And also to feel it. Try to feel it. It's hard. It's not fun. But yeah, those are just some things. And writing, journaling, just stream of consciousness. Like, that helps too.
That's wonderful. Thank you. Well, we are approaching 6:30, so I just want to thank everyone for joining us for this intimate conversation. And also keep an eye on your emails. You will be receiving both a recording of the event and a survey as well. We welcome any input, whether it be sharing your experience or proposing future programs. And again, thank you for your time this evening. We really appreciate you joining us.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye, friends.